The Nigerian political scene has experienced violence, form of thuggery in various degrees, particularly during elections. Now, electoral violence is seen in different ways, from verbal attacks to outright killings, and political scientists of the opinion that politics in Nigeria is more linked to that of late. Now, on the other hand, electoral violence can be random or organized, as we've seen from time to time, and these violent acts usually end up influencing, in one way or the other, the electoral process negatively. Now, what can be done to reduce and ultimately do away with violence in the Nigerian electoral system? How can the government and all the relevant institutions lay a new foundation for peaceful elections in Nigeria? Or what other regular Nigerians can they do as agents of change to bring about peaceful dispensation, that is, an election free of violence and thuggery? All these questions and more on this table as we come on the program this evening. Welcome to Nigeria Today. My name is Blessing Abu. Yes, with me to further speak on the issue of political violence and the Nigerian political system on the stratosphere, if you ask me. I'd like to welcome at this point Hajia Binta, that's just to my far left now, Hajia Binta Muazu. She's a prominent politician as well as an APC stalwart. Welcome to the program, Nigeria Today.
Thank you, Madam Blessing.
And I'd also like to welcome Mr. Bako Manzi. He describes himself as a technotician.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Perhaps we'll kick off on that note. Who is a technotician?
Yeah, so technoticians are a new breed of thinkers and political actors on the Nigerian scene, to which I belong. We're a bit broad-based at the moment, but you find us warehoused within the newer emergent political forces, movements, and parties.
Great to know that.
Thank you.
Now, we're concerned about what happens in these political parties, especially time of elections, or even pre-elections. It's a process on its own circle. And are concerned this evening about violence in all its facets. Let's start with you still, Mr. Manzi. What constitutes or what can be described as violence in an election or electoral violence generally?
Okay, so typically violence, as we know in Nigeria, is associated, like you mentioned in your intro, with the taking of lives or the taking of the normal privileges of day-to-day existence as a result of certain anomalies, in this case perhaps things that have gone wrong in politics. And so it triggers all these adverse reactions that have negative impacts on society and members of society and in various forms. So it can take the forms of killings, assaults, arson, thuggery, intimidation. To me, these are all subsets of the issue of violence during elections.
Ajamwazu, yes. What propels electoral violence? It wasn't this bad.
Well, of course, in a situation where politicians use money to get, thugs, of course, there will be violence in election. And apart from that, if there's no fairness in the whole system, what I mean is that the election should be free and fair and credible. At the moment there isn't that kind of fair level ground for politicians to participate, of course that gives a room for violence, for thuggery, and a lot of problems.
But how did we get to this level? Of course, politics have always been there from time, we could say, as far as man started. So what actually got us to this level, especially for our own political landscape in Nigeria? How did we get to this level?
Right, so for me, I think I'll attribute it to the increasing desperation by political office seekers to manipulate the process and also in some way to use particularly the poor masses as cannon fodder for these kinds of negative affairs. So in the past, of course, you know, during the early independence years, we even had some forms of violence in those days. But in comparison to what we have today, what we had before was child's play on the magnitude. Now, why is that so? Increasingly, you will get to understand, when you look back at history, you would understand that the pre-independence or the immediate post-independence era was characterized by politics of at least some form of more dignified service to the people. It was more altruistic on the part of the leaders who felt that, you know, we were working in the, and you could see some level of connect. But over time, there's been a disconnect between governance systems, which the politicians are elected to man, and what the machinery, that machinery is supposed to be delivering on, which is service to the people. So this disconnect makes it such that, you know, the politician tries to hijack or kind of lay hold of this governance machinery and privatize it, either for himself or his clique or his group or his ethnicity or whatever sort of nomenclature you can put there. So these things create the disconnect that fuels the violence and all of that in another way.
Let's get back to Hajia Muazu. Well, it just talked about aspects of being desperate as a politician. What would make, if you're truly going in for service to the people, if your people so much trust you, if your people so much believe in you, why would you now get desperate so as to engage people who will make life unbearable and actually unleash terror on the people? What gets the politician desperate?
Well, I think the politicians that are desperate really are people that don't have the interests of common man and the country as a whole at heart. Because if you are in politics to give service to the people and to the nation, you will not think of causing any problem. In fact, you will put God first, because if really you want to give service to the country, then you will try to see that you avoid anything that will cause chaos, thuggery, or any problem. Most of the politicians that you see, they are desperate, are those that have money and believe that with money they can get anything they want.
Now, that's the second time you're using the issue of money,
yes.
Politicians and money.
Yes.
At this, what actually fuel violence? If you have money, shouldn't you use it for the benefits of the humanity?
This is it.
So why would money and thuggery, aspects of violence, also come together in actually pushing what we have in our electoral process today? Money bags, politicians?
Exactly. This is it.
Yeah. So for me, you see, this whole money thing, somehow as a society, as we have continued in independence, we have increasingly also created a society that is malfunctioning. So that brings about the issue of money and the primacy that the premium that is placed on money and the acquisition of it by all means. Now, the politicians of today, except for some of us, at least at the moment, except for the technicians, the politicians of today, they understand this societal issue. They know that our society has been malfunctioning. And rather than do something to fix it, through value reorientation, service, focus on service, and all those kinds of virtues, they have tended to capitalize on it. So you have people who have, like Hajia mentioned, some money. First, they begin with a little money, which they probably have stolen in some contract or some other venture. And then they use that as seed money into this murky terrain of politics, just so that they can capture power, and on the basis of that capture, you know, benefit themselves and those cliques that I mentioned about. So you have a society which is increasingly disconnected in terms of, for instance, Nigeria's Gini coefficient, which is the measure of, wealth distribution disconnect, will tell you that Nigeria ranks, very low, right? So these kinds of things are playing out. And primarily, it is because our society, side by side, our retrogression as a nation, our society has also malfunctioned in terms of its inability to regenerate and retain, or at least regenerate some of those virtues which used to keep us at least sane and functional as a society.
Okay, let's explore further. When we're politicians or whoever on the political landscape unleash violence, what does it do to the people? Because we're not just talking about just even the electorates now. Of course, the people who will work in the form of maybe electoral officers, as well as not just the people now, the total society. What does this violence do to us in our democracy?
I think it really affects us in a very bad way. One, by introducing our children, that is the youth that are being introduced into the thuggery, we put them in a situation that at the end of the day, we, the politicians, when I say we, I don't mean myself, but some of us, that work with thuggery to get what they want, we, at the end of the day, be victim of that circumstance. If you look at it at the terrain we are now, political terrain that we are in now, you will see that a lot of the youths are being given, you know, drugs or money to go and buy weapons. And you see that now, in most of the northern part of the country, there's this Sara Suka. And all this Sara Suka is being introduced by our politicians who have been sponsoring all these youths with money to buy drugs, to buy, you know, weapons or what have you, just to attack their opponents. And at the end of the day, they themselves become victims, because these youths go to the extent of, you know, hitting anybody they see along their way, because they are not in their senses. So I think the length at the length that we are going, I think is very important. The politicians know that thuggery is not good, and government must stand and make sure that they introduce a law that will ban any politician who involve himself or herself into thuggery or support in, you know, putting our youths into that kind of mayhem.
All right, Mr. Nancy, we're still talking about what this violence does for people. First is the trust in the process, which is democracy. And by the time violence comes on, the people tend to withdraw. And that bringing about a culture that is already different from what is supposed to be practiced. What more does violence in the electoral process do for the people? Or how does it affect the people?
Yeah, so I think Hajia has beautifully articulated some of the negative effects of violence. I mean, it's a no-brainer to begin to count the negative costs, if I may put it that way, of violence on our society. First, we lose human life. Yes. And human life is the most important ingredient in development. The human capacity is so big that when you lose one individual, it's a big loss to this country and perhaps to the whole world. Because people who are killed in these processes are people who could perhaps tomorrow become anything you can imagine. These are the #1 assets of the nation. So when you maim them, you disable them in some form, or you kill them, you are doing tremendous damage to the country. However, there's also a dilemma in this matter, which is this, that if you have, and Hajia mentioned part of it, that if you have, for instance, a situation where government is supposed to do something about violence, but the very participants or actors or sponsors of violence are the occupants of the offices of government, then you see that whatever effort they're going to make are going to be based on either lip service or not based on fundamentals. And this is part of the problem. And for some of us, these are some of the issues that we must bring to the front burner and address them.
Well, good enough. We've started doing some of that through our own medium here as well. But gentlemen and lady, we'll take this break. Well, not a break actually. It's It's top measure for us to actually feel the pulse of Nigerians that we spoke to earlier in the day, knowing what they think about violence in the electoral process. We'll get to see that in our clip in a short while.
Very easy to prevent in a way that the political parties leaders should not embrace the aspect of desperacy. Because when they are showing the aspect of desperate in getting a certain things, automatically they will use the youth.
The best thing to do is to create awareness to the youth, most especially using some medium like social media or on the air, or using the traditional rulers.
Only through employment of masses to get what to do, only through this that it can reduce the violence drastically.
Well, we can prevent it by voting for the right people, and also by casting our vote for who we want to be there, and also not collecting bribe for some particular violence acts.
I want to use this opportunity to call on Nigeria youths. Nigeria, the unity of this country is important. The future of our unborn children is very important. Youth should not allow themselves to be used by any politicians for their selfish interests.
Yes, so still watching Nigeria Today, taking a look at electoral violence or violence during the political landscape. And I see I have my guests seated. I have Mr. Nanzi and also Hajam Binta Muazu still in the studio with us. Now, from some of the respondents, there is that will, they want to do it right. We should get it right. Yeah. And now for many, they have blamed actually this political violence on on the lack of true democratic culture. What do you think?
That's true, but that's not where it should end. We've all agreed, and we saw the clip of Nigerians talking about how to go about creating peace. Yeah, our society, we know quite a lot of things have malfunctioned. But for me, I'd rather go back to the very fundamentals, which is the building blocks of what we have as a society today, which is the family. Let's go back there and try to see. Even the family has its own challenges as we speak. But perhaps it's about the only unit of society that we can, when you roll back, that's where you end up, because someone came from a mother and a father somewhere. A lot of people nowadays are born out of wedlock and they don't have homes and all that. But our society still has a bit of family life. Let's go back there and try to begin the process of re-engineering our society. Because if you raise a family that is based on the principles of sound-minded thinking, peaceful coexistence, interest of others, interest of society, consideration for others before self, service, showing love, all these things that some of us learned within our families. If you are brought up like that, then the tendency is that as you grow up, you would find it a bit harder to turn violent suddenly. Some things may happen and you may, but the tendency is that when you have these things through the ground, you can do that. So that for me is a major plank. But like I said, even family setups have issues. Now, there's also something to be said about belief systems.
Yes.
And here, the religious beliefs of the people are important. For instance, you should not have a society or a set of people in society who believe that violence towards others who are not like me is allowed or should be sanctioned or should be acceptable for the purposes of whatever, promoting my ideology or my belief system. That's wrong. The world has moved on from that system of thinking. Why do we still hold on to it? So we all need all these things coming together in order to promote a peaceful, progressive society.
But is there a way, is there a way we can actually resist this? You just talked about aspect of family, having a social re-engineering of what it is that we have as our culture. And if the people know that, okay, this is the kind of thing we want, it wasn't this way before, and this is the actual way, We have the faith-based organizations, we have the traditional rulers, we have other things that we hold so dear as value system.
Yes.
And people decide to use that to actually resist this. Is it possible for us to actually do that without any other recourse? Okay, maybe some desperate people will still come and induce us with some money or some other means. Is it possible?
It's possible. I think he has made a very important point here in regards to parenting. That is, it's very important. Parents pay attention to their children right from youth, right from when they are young, by bringing them up very well, and then at the same time paying attention the kind of friends they associate with. And then if they ask permission, they're going out, when they come back, like, you try to plagiarize and know the kind of activities he or she involve herself. From there, you will, if you are a very caring and loving parent, you will be able to identify if your son or daughter has changed or has started developing attitudinal change in her behavior. You'll be able to know that she is being influenced from outside. If parents are doing very well in upbringing, I think it will also help. And at the same time, like religion, no religion, Islam or Christianity, does not allows violence in all aspects of our religion, Christianity or Islam. And then apart from that as well, I also want to touch the aspect of sensitization. That is, the INEC should try and make sure that they introduce educating the youth. The country as a whole needs really programs that will be carried on.
I'm sure there have been advocacy from time to time, even part of the Electoral Reform Act gave
not as much as it is expected.
So
that
wouldn't political parties too take up that aspect?
Yes, political parties should do that. Also the INEC in particular should do that more than any other sector. They're part of the government.
Okay, I know at the bottom of this for violence,
educating.
Yes. Education is key.
Yeah.
Now, at the bottom line, or at the bottom of this, for desperate politicians to win and be in power, to entrench yourself and all of that. But definitely, we want to curb that to the barest minimum. And that brings us to one other area. People are talking about technology being used, at least advanced technology, to actually help to checkmate whatever it is that you want to see. So in order for you to actually win, and win clearly, so everyone knows, okay, truly, you won. How does that help in curbing this violence?
Yeah. So let me say a word about the issue of, you know, how you can checkmate some of these things. Yes, technology is good, and technology will help and can help. But the whole thing is about the human mind, about the fact that we must accept responsibility as a society that things have gone wrong and try to fix it. And let me also chip in about what I think you mentioned it about political parties trying to do something. So you have people like me, you know, the new school
technicians.
Yes, technicians. Yeah, that's the word. So because we have seen the dislocation between the process of capture of the machinery of governance. That's why some of us are on this journey to say, look, our society must reset its value systems. And so we're saying to people, and we're joining voices with the likes of INEC, and we're advocating within communities and within families, principally because these are the sources from which we derive membership of our political parties and movements, to say, look, let's jettison the old ways of thinking and build a better, a newer thinking Nigeria.
Must be placed.
Correct.
Last word from Maya Jamal.
Well, what I want to say is politicians should know that what they are doing is not right. Most of them, those that use money to induce, you know, youths, and from there, you know, violence and other thuggery take place. And secondly, I would want the National Assembly to make a law that will ban any politician who is found, doing thuggery or sharing money that induce the youth.
And
then at the same time, to try as much as possible to make a free and fair level ground for politicians. If there is justice and fairness, there won't be problem of desperation and then do or die affairs in wanting to be by hook or crook. If there is free and fair ground, of course the politicians will be happy to cooperate and do what is right.
All right, Hajia Binta Muazu, thank you very much for coming on the program. Prominent politician and APC stalwart.
Thank you.
I appreciate your time on the program this evening. We'd also like to thank Mr. Bako Nanzin. He's a technician.
Thank you. Thank you, Abu.
All the best to you, technician across the country, and let's do it right.
We're doing our best.
Right.
Thank you.
And on behalf of all of us in the studio, we'd like to say thank you for being a part of our discussion. The program returns tomorrow at 7:30. Thank you for watching. My name is Blessing Abu.